What's going on, everybody? We had some technical difficulties, but we are live. We have Will here. Hopefully, y'all are having a great day so far. If you've been on this show before, let us know in the chat. Like, hey, this is your first time. That's great. If you've been here before, that's great. And you know what? I'm always going to ask y'all, if you have been here before, where are you tuning in from? We always like to see, where people are tuning in from different parts of the world. So that's always cool to see. And we're excited to dive into some emails. And Will, are you ready? You ready for
this? I'm ready, man. I've got my own name tag and everything. In case you are wondering, I was trying to log in and it kept telling me I'm Morgan, and I was like, oh, what's going on? I love it, dude. We got some first timers in the house. This is awesome.
Well, shout out! Oh, I love the Obi-Wan there. Good old GIF or GIFs or however you say. What is it? Is it GIF or GIF? Like, let's have this. Let's flesh this out. What do you think it is?
So I know there's like a proper name for it, but like, that doesn't matter. Let's be real.
It doesn't matter.
Like, who in their right mind spelled something GIF and thought it was like GIF, like 50? Because like you have the peanut butter that is like, that definitely existed before the like whatever that thing was, right?
Yeah, so, that's like, true.
How can you go about trying to claim Jiffy's turf?
These are all great assumptions, great breakdown. So, I'm curious of what y'all think in the chat. But again, appreciate everybody. We'll give a couple shout outs and then we'll go into it. Shout out to Barcelona in the house. We got UK, we have Toronto, Arizona, we have Minnesota. What, Disney World? I mean, you're in Disney World watching this? Like that's kind of, if you're actually in Disney World, I guess shout out to you if you're watching this while you're actually in Disney World. We got Dublin in the house. Shout out to Vancouver's in the house. We got Paris. We got a very international here across the board. So, all right, y'all. So what we're going to be doing here today is we're going to be tearing down emails live from reps who sent in the get feedback. So please don't be hostile. Please don't. We're not going to be roasting, but we're going to give perspective on how you can be better when you are writing your emails. And before we do go into that, we do want to break down, okay, like who's everybody here? What's going on? So Will, if you want to quickly introduce yourself, I'll introduce myself and we'll get into it.
Yeah. So I'm Will Allred. I'm one of the co-founders at a company called Lavender. It's a Chrome extension that's helping 20,000 folks every single month in their inbox, writing better emails and doing it faster. And so we see a lot of emails. We're coming up on our 100 millionth email analyzed soon. And I cannot wait for that moment because I will start that phrase with 100 million emails later, and we still haven't found you well. But that said, you learn a lot from seeing that many emails. And so I'm really excited to, preach from the data today, as well from, the perspective of somebody who gets a lot of cold emails and like really that buyer's perspective that I think a lot of sellers are missing.
Awesome. And I'm the host for today, and I am the creative advisor at Cognism. Also have my own company, Institute Media Productions. We help amplify companies' organic content through employee advocacy. And where my perspective is going to come from is I've been an SDR myself and managed SDR teams. And then I previously was a full-time sales trainer at JB Sales, and I trained Snowflake, Salesforce, Slack, Zoom. So all the companies you probably are using or have heard of before. So I've seen what the top reps have done to get meetings and what they do to write those emails, and also talked to a lot of executives on what they respond to. So just to give you all the perspective of what's going on. All right. So now, with all that being said, we're gonna dive right into this. So when we go over these emails, by the way, what our whole purpose here is, we're gonna be diving into what we like, what we don't like. Also, as well, the goal is you're gonna take this perspective, and you all are gonna go out and do what you need to do based on this feedback. All right. You can give feedback in the chat as well. This is for you all to have a conversation as a part of this, but that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to let Will, as he's reading it, he's going to dive into, okay, this is what I like. And he's also going to dive into, I don't really like this. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to provide real feedback here. That's the goal of it. Again, any questions that this is also the last thing before we go into it. Any questions that you have throughout this entire conversation, put them in the Q&A. We will answer them in the Q&A. We'll make sure we can get the most out of it. That's going to be incredibly important. But Will, what's your feedback on this so far?
Yeah, so it's long. That's for sure. I mean, like, I respect this. We work in a regulated industry, and so they expect something with a level of formality, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be overly complicated, and it doesn't have to be extremely long, right? And so when we look at the data, what we tend to see, shorter emails work better. This is, by the way, regardless of persona, regardless of industry, shorter is better. The average amount of time that someone is going to read your email is about 10 seconds. And so, as Morgan was talking, I gave it sort of two passes. I gave it the actually what a reader is going to do pass of like, how do I scan this in 10 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
And then I gave it the, okay, let's deep dive into the content, right? So 10 seconds, if you're thinking about the average amount of like words somebody could read, that's like 40 words. And so we're blowing way over that really quickly. And you start to think about what's happening in that 10-second period. I'm trying to get a quick sense for what this message is, what it's about. And when it's overly complicated, meaning we use big words, we write long, complicated sentences, right? We're looking in that first sentence alone, right? And by the way, some of these words, they're common, but they're big, right? So I look at someone, I look at challenges, I look at effectively, I look at specializations, communications. Those are monster words that are just like eating up at somebody's mental bandwidth. And so I want somebody to be able to read through this message in 10 seconds, grasp exactly why I'm reaching out and what it is that I have to bring to the table. And so with that, that's like my main piece of feedback from just quickly looking at this. The other piece is like a tone piece, Morgan. Like I'm sure you can pick this up, but it's like it's very it's a lot about them. But it's also very so what I'm looking for, informative, right? Like here's key findings, here's the survey that we did. Like if that's what the email is about, then that's what the email is about. But this email is about like so many different things that it just kind of loses the reader along the way.
Yeah. This is all great perspectives, and as y'all are listening in, if you want to add in the chat, you can as well. So I would say that long is where the immediately goes to. And we talked about this last time. Taking this long email, this probably could be easily 3 emails if we really broke this down, right? We could easily do that. I think the biggest thing is that you don't want your email to be an infomercial, right? That's the last thing that you want to do. I don't know if anyone has ever, stayed up late and then all of a sudden you see this infomercial that comes on. You're like, wait, what's going on, right? That's essentially what this is here. And it's also important as well to make sure that it doesn't sound like that, because this sounds like it's going out to 1,000 people and it's a marketing campaign. And when we're in sales, we want to add context to make sure it's relevant to the people we're talking to, right? Otherwise, it's not going to matter. So I think it's important for everybody here to we were throwing some funny against in the chat, but I think it's important here, right, to go ahead and take the time to figure out how can you break this up into different emails. What I would say here is right here, the outside functions. Okay, that factors, that could be an email, right? 9 out of 10. Okay, that could be an email. So that'd be my advice here as well. If anyone wants to add in the chat on how they would change this up, we're open to the feedback too. But I think that's one of the things as well. We also do see at the top that the context is it needs to be highly formal. So that I understand that. But I would say that if we're really, really looking at this, I think it just needs to be less, let's say less information. You need to stick on one point is it kind of where I'm at, because I'm seeing the top is saying it's formal. So that's a piece as well.
Yeah, Morgan, Russ asked a really good question, which is how do we make it prospective centered with like also like grabbing the attention around us? I'm a huge fan of telling people that the reader actually doesn't care about you at all. You're meeting them in their inbox, right? Meeting them on their turf. It's a glorified to-do list, right? And so if I'm looking at my, to-do list and all of a sudden there's this like infomercial, as Morgan said, about like you and all the things that you have going on, one, I have to stop what I'm doing. I have to start thinking about this. And then I've got to like translate this back into what I'm dealing with and the problems that I have on my plate. And so it's like a huge cognitive shift. It's a huge ask out of somebody. And so if I'm thinking about this from like the medical affairs perspective and like what they have going on, right? You could have easily just started this as like trying to start a conversation, right? It almost feels like this email was sent with the expectation of like, Morgan, I just need you to send me the DocuSign.
I think that's exactly what I was feeling there as well. And that does lead into one of Brian's questions. So let's bring, well, first of all, Russ, did that help answer your question? So let us know in the chat if that did. And then if it didn't, we can come back. But this is a quick answer. Brian, he's asking, what is the ideal number of words to use?
Oh, the data would tell you 25 to 50 and like cutoff point 75. As you start to go beyond that, the average cold email is somewhere between 125 to 150. You're going to see about 68% less replies by writing that average email versus cutting it down to that 25 to 50 range. So 25 to 50 words is not a lot of space, not a lot of time. And so if there's like a lot of depth to the problem that you're trying to talk about, the thing that I encourage folks to do is lean on your signature line. A lot of folks are just sleeping on this, which is if you think about what a signature line is, it's a glorified billboard in the inbox where you get to just clearly state, hey, this is what we provide. This is like, you know, a tagline of what makes it valuable, right? So like I would have Will Allred, co-founder and COO at Lavender, helping sales reps write better emails faster, top 10, writing assistant for, whatever, right? I would try to make it like somewhat tailored to the recipient maybe, but like the point is like, I'm really honing in and focusing on like, how do I make it concrete what we provide in the reader's mind within that little box at the bottom of my email? Because if your question and like the research that you're bringing to the table is interesting enough, they are going to be curious and they're going to want to dig in, which curiosity is a big emotion that you're trying to drive when you do your outbound.
I love that. Great. No, Russ, glad that helped answer you. Let's get one more. Mark, I see your question. We're going to go to the email that we will answer your question. I don't want you to think that I'm about to ignore you, but we want to get to the next emails for everybody here so they can get what they came for. David says, what is your perspective on saying this in a video and having a thumbnail in the email with a lot less text? I'll dive into this. So I'm with it, but here's where I'm not with it. All right. So if you do it as a first email, and again, someone can always come back and say they think differently, but this is just my own perspective on what I've seen. Doing it in a first email can lead to going to spam. You could get like risk, etc., all those different things. And also as well, like you just want to get through the firewall. So sitting the video first as the first touch, I feel like is something I don't recommend people to do. I know some people are different, but this is just my perspective. I find that sitting the video as the third or the fourth touch is better. And the thing is, everyone consumes information differently. So some people may like, I don't know, rare people, right? May like this long email. All right, cool. Some people, just to Will's point, are going to most likely, according to the data, like a shorter email, like a text. But some people may not even want to read that and they just want to watch the video, and that's more intriguing to them. So there's nothing wrong with doing a video. It just really depends on where you're doing it in that step. That's important.
Yeah. And I think to the content of the video, right? I wouldn't like go down into the key findings of some survey and like the first video that you're sending. I might like trickle that out and have multiple video touch points across the sequence of the cadence, right? So maybe like one email is like, hey, we ran this survey of 1,000 HCPs across 6 countries. Given some core reason for why I'm reaching out to you, I thought you'd find it interesting. You want me to send it over? And then instead of just sending it over, send it over with the video. And like in the video, you walk through like, hey, wanted to just like showcase some key findings before you dive into the report, because I thought these would be most like interesting given what's going on with you and your organization, right? That right there would be exactly how to leverage video to bring that to light. But one of the things you'll notice is like I really, really focused on just like one thing within this much larger note.
Love that. So, David, let us know if that helps answer your question. Quick answer on the suggested video length. You typically want to aim for 45 to 60 seconds. If you go beyond 60 seconds, there's a massive drop off, almost 40% less likely to watch the whole thing. Drops off on reply rates too. So that's an example. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next slide here as well and go over the next email so that we can tear this down. So as we go to this next thing, for everyone, that if you see in the Q&A, we have a ton of different questions in there. So if you want to thumbs up the question that you feel like is the most relevant, that's helpful for me to pull what questions we need to ask next. So I'm just letting you know that's what's going to be the most helpful here. Now I'm gonna let Will read this email for a little bit, and then to give his feedback here first. Again, go in that Q&A, thumbs things up. We're gonna answer questions in between. And if you want to add your feedback, you can as well. But Will, I'm gonna toss it to you here. What do you like in this email? What is something you're like, okay, like we need to consider it a little bit differently? Talk to us.
So it's like hit or miss on this like first line. I feel like this could be kind of polarizing. Hey, I've been trying to get in contact with you for some time, but I feel like you soften it with that like, but I appreciate. It's just like it's fluffy in my mind. Like, if I'm trying to call out that I've done some outreach before. I want to say it was SalesLoft. It's either SalesLoft or Gong did some really good analysis of this. Like if you call out like, oh, I called you already, and like, or hey, I left you a voicemail, it actually has no impact on your response rate, which I found pretty interesting. And so when I think about this like as preview text, right, this sort of falls into the same bucket as hey, Will, or hey, Morgan, I know you're super busy, but I wanted to follow up on my last note and see if, right? And that's all they see in the preview text. And it's just like you wasted some really valuable real estate to not really add anything. Also, the call out for a 15-minute Teams call, I personally despise a Teams call, and I have no idea why you're reaching out. And so
Is it just because it's Teams? You hate on
just
Teams right now?
I've never had a good call on Teams.
Who else is hating
Never.
on Teams?
Never had a good call on Teams. I will just like come out and say it. That software is terrible. Like send me a Zoom link. I'll be there.
There's a lot of people who are hating on Teams. I didn't know it had this much hate.
It's just not my thing. I don't know what it is about the layout, the structure is just like so off from everything else. So like you're gonna come out hot with a polarizing place to come meet, and I'm like, yo, I don't want to go there.
What about Skype?
I don't even know why you want me there.
What about Skype? What if they said Skype?
I didn't know you use Skype. All right. So in the third paragraph, we finally get to it, by the way, which is the reason for my approach, which is an oddly formal way of saying it. Almost 100% of my customers are working on or either improving their security posture by adding cyber resiliency into their plans. I don't know what their plan is. It's like they say it in a way that almost sounds like they're like corporate strategy, but it almost comes across like cyber insurance. Just reading it at a quick glance, I'd be like, oh, my cyber insurance plan? Like, what are we talking about here? Right. And so these are the questions that like I'm asking as like someone who's quickly reading. Your messaging just has to get clear and crisp as quickly as possible. So like I would start here within that message, and then just like this like notion of cyber resiliency needing to be capitalized is also a little odd to me. This is fluffy. I thought it'd be worth a chat in case there's something you're also looking at. It's just like not necessary to say that. You could honestly write this entire email of like, hey, given about 100% of the customers that I'm working with are focused on improving their security posture, I wanted to see if that's a priority for you. And like you would have said everything within this message and then some, but in way less time.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree to this. I'm gonna add 2 to 3 additional points here, and then we'll go into some questions that people are doing it. And feel free to drop in the chat or the Q&A, and also add your perspective to this as well. We've also found out that no one likes Teams, so I didn't know that. I really didn't know it was that hostile out here for Teams. Jeez. All right, so
it's tough out here for Microsoft.
I'm gonna echo this because this is really important for everyone listening in. If you're listening in and you are a sales rep, put a 1 in the chat, because I think this is just important for every single one of you to understand this. And I want you to eliminate this from your language. I just genuinely I'm just trying to help you out here. This might sound harsh, but it's important for everyone to listen in and delete this immediately. Okay. I've been trying to get in contact with you from some time. This like seeps with desperation. Now, let's talk about this. How many people listening in love people who are desperate? You're like, oh, well, I really want to hang out with this person. Like, I need to spend more time with desperate people. Let me know in the chat if that's the case. I don't know. So maybe.
Russ is already calling it out.
Russ is calling it out. We're not doing that. But the thing is that, like, I just want you to really think about this, right? Desperation is gonna get you nowhere. And I'll tell you this right now. I've been trying to get in contact with you some time. Yo, look, that's not gonna get you anywhere, right? And so I think there's a difference between being pleasantly persistent. I think there's a difference, right, of doing certain things that are going to get you in front of the right people, right? But I've been trying to get you contact for some time. You have to imagine how many other reps are saying the same exact thing, right? And it doesn't make you stand out, and that gets you deleted. So just for everybody listening in, like saying, "Hey, I haven't heard back from you, bonus back up to the top." That's never really going to help you, because like everyone else is doing that. And I think that's going to be incredibly important across the board for you to do that, to not do that, right? What I will say though is the PS. I'm a huge fan of the PS though. Okay, not what's said, but I'm a fan of, right, the PS. So I think something here, like how I would have adjusted this email, I would have taken out sentence 1, 2, and 3. And then in the PS, I actually would have taken the business report and said, hey, like, if you're interested, I can send you a business report. Feel free to apply, right? I put that in the PS, and then I would lead with something around if we go back to the consultancy service, I would say something. I don't know what exactly how they would target it, but I would say like a personalized sentence around that, right? I'd be like, hey, whatever their name is, looked at your website. Looks like you're looking to grow your team's infrastructure because you're hiring, I don't know, SecOps people, like security ops people. And here's a way that we help, right? Boom, you go into the gap analysis consultancy, and then you would say, like, are you interested in a conversation or something like that? I'm literally just telling you how I'd reword this, right? The third thing is you have to be careful, right? Because almost 100% of my customers are currently working on either improving their security posture or adding subscriber resiliency into their plans. You have to be careful here, because what type of customers, right? You have to be very, very granular there. Okay, 100% of my customers. Okay, what does that mean? Do you only have 3 customers? So like, all right, that doesn't really tell the whole story, right? So I think it's important.
Like me?
Yeah, right. Like, is that even in my realm? So I think it's important as well to add that perspective into that piece. So that's a key thing. And I want to, what Mark just said, we're abandoning threaded email cadences because it hints at that desperation. I think that's actually really interesting. And we're going to answer a couple questions here and go to the next email. But
I wouldn't do that. I would not abandon the threaded email cadence.
Talk to us about this one.
Because, okay, I get these all the time where it's like a ping, and they're all like disconnected in my inbox. And the problem with that is, like, I don't have context from the last one, right? And so if you're trying to build that story off of one another, unless you're just like fully different topics of what you're reaching out on, like, you have to keep it together. Otherwise, I'm going to just like be like, I'm not going to go look for that message, right? I'm not going to go look for that prior context that's going to help me. So that's like my one caveat there. And I thread based off of my reason for having that conversation, right? And so, Morgan, one of the key things that you brought up was like, you're hiring for, security analysts. I can't remember the exact observation you brought in, but there's like a core thing that's bringing you to strike up, like, here's why I think this is gonna be a relevant conversation. The PS, the data around this is like, If you sent this as is with the PS, right? No personalization elements. It's just like, an automated step within a sequencer. This will not change your reply rate. If you personalize the message, like it's truly like, hey, I saw you're hiring for that security analyst role. In the description, you mentioned XYZ. Sounds like this is a big deal for you. Am I off? And then in the PS, like you offer that like whatever piece, right? That PS is going to add 35% more replies. It's that personalization that really matters when you're talking about a PS.
I love that. And I think that's a good perspective for everyone to use moving forward and to dive into. And we're going to go into some questions here. And then before we go to the next email, I think it's also important as well, if we're looking at this, like to be mindful. It's not the thread technique, it's what you put in the thread that has led people to be annoyed by it, right? I think it's just the bubbling back up to the top. You haven't seen my email yet, here you go. It just becomes annoying, right? The language inside of it rather than the thread itself. So that's something as well. But if you have more questions, put them in the Q&A because we're about to answer them right now. So okay, so this is actually
go ahead. I was going to say, to your point about what's annoying in those threads, right? If you think about email 1 that we saw, that person spilled all of their candy. It's all out there. And so what do they have to follow up with, right? Only desperation at that point. It's like, hey, I haven't heard from you. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And like in reality, they never actually absorbed anything in email 1. And so now you're desperate, struggling, trying to figure out. And so in that case, yeah, abandon thread and start a new one.
Immediately. All right. So let's answer some questions here. I really like this one here. Thoughts on sending a LinkedIn InMail after 3 emails and saying, have you gotten my emails? Which is like what we're talking about. I'm heavily against this because innately we would never respond to these anyways. Because it's like, I probably haven't gotten it or haven't responded because it wasn't interesting. But I know we just kind of talked about this, but any nuance on this because it's an InMail, or does it still say the same?
Well, I can tell you, like, from an InMail perspective, what was the stat I read? 90% of InMails are longer than 400 characters, which is like wild, right? Like
that's crazy.
The bar on InMail is so low, so low. So like, does this perform better than the average LinkedIn InMail? Of course, but I think what you need here is just a little bit more context, right? Have you gotten my emails? Given X reason, I thought like what I was sending you would be relevant. Just something that says like, hey, I'm not just like automating and spamming.
Yeah. And so this leads into the same realm. Best tactic for when a prospect is ghosting you after a call or previous engagement. So before you go into this answer, we're saying ghosting after I'm assuming discovery call, or is it ghosting after a cold call, which are 2 different answers. And I guess previous engagement kind of gives us into like, I guess that's a discovery call because it could be both. So yeah, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, we could go down 2 different rabbit holes there, but I'm a huge fan. Like, okay, so like the deal's in progress, we're having conversations and they ghost, just being like, hey, this is not a priority for you anymore, right? Like value your own time more than like this person is clearly valuing yours. And so you can just come out with that, be like, hey, like understand there might be other competing priorities, like no sweat, let me know when it's a better time. And like, also recognize that they're not going to operate on your timeline all the time. But I think questions like that, those sort of like those moments where you get to challenge and sort of like, have some respect for yourself in that moment. It opens up a lot of like visibility into other priorities that are competing with what you're doing.
Yeah. What Will said is important. Make sure to respect your time. pleasantly persistent is what I always recommend. But this is just my way of thinking about it. So if someone is ghosting you, it's extremely easy to ghost someone if you don't see them. Right? If I just see an email that says like, "Hey, any feedback?" Like, blows back up to the top, like, "Hey, hope all is well." Like, okay, yeah, I'm probably gonna ignore that, right? I don't really care. But if I send someone a video and I say, "Hey, here's the reason I'm reaching back out. We discussed these things," then I'm gonna have a better chance of getting them back in line if I use that. Now, here's another one that I use, and again, it depends on how much context you have, right? You have to make sure you do good discovery for this one. I do a subject line that says, "Is this still accurate?" And so what I do is say, "Hi, Will," and this is important for this to be yeah, "Is this still accurate?" as a subject line. But then the key is, right, is that when I'm reaching out in that first sentence, I say, this is when I genuinely actually do mean this. I'll say like, "I hope everything is okay." Because here's the thing: there's been scenarios where like someone has ghosted me and like something personal was happening, and then you're gonna feel bad. So like there could actually be things happening that you don't know about. They could be getting fired in the next couple weeks too, right? And that's happened as well, where like they got let go and then they went to another company, but I didn't get mad about it, right? And then it led to that piece, right? So I always say I hope everything's okay if I've actually talked to them. Then I'll say, based on our conversation so far, here's what we've covered, and this is where we're at. So then I'll have like a 5 bullet points of like, you're looking to accomplish this, here's what your objectives are, etc. And then I'm like, is this still accurate? Or if it's not, let's hop on a call to assess. So then that allows me to then get back on the same page. I've closed a couple deals that way because as long as you're doing your discovery, you just want to make things are still accurate. Because if they're not, and you're now in a misty point, you need to get clarification and hop on a call.
Yeah. Which, Morgan, I'm sure you'd agree with this. One of the easiest ways to avoid getting ghosted is to set those next steps when you're on the phone with them.
Oh, 100%. And that's where most people get cooked, right? So they're not setting that next step on the call, which some people, I don't know if you disagree with this. Some people disagree with that tactic. They say like, don't set the next step on the call. And I was like, every time that I haven't done that and someone's like, "Hey, I'll get back to you," they never get back to me. So I'm like,
it means it's not a priority. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like,
no, if they don't
set
next steps, it's not a priority.
I'm like, absolutely not. Like,
I can tell you because I know that for myself. I'm just too nice.
Oh yeah, I know what it is. I call them out right there. I'm like, yeah. Typically, when people say that, they're not interested. So did I do something wrong? Right? Like, I try to have that conversation. So that's the pieces there. I personally use Loom to do it. There's Video, there's OneMob, there's a lot of different video products out there. Vouch, there's whatever you decide to do. And I do email the video to the person. And then in terms of showing the video, it's a very personal thing. For at least I can show a prospective video later, like if we have time, but that's not the purpose of this entire segment. That might be for another time. We can come back to that. But in terms of the videos to the person, when I'm inside of those conversations, especially when it gets later down the line, like it gets a little bit different. But we could discuss that maybe on another workshop that we do, since we are focused on email here. But I would recommend, like, it literally is just acknowledging the scenario. You're handling whatever the objection is or whatever's going on, and you just keep it super authentic. I hate using the word authentic because it sounds very fluffy, but that's literally how you do it. It's just like if you were to hop on a call with them and you were to break down what's going on, except you're just doing it in video and you're saving meeting time. That's like the best way that I recommend people to think about this. So now let's shift. Okay, so here's another email teardown. All right. And by the way, if you have more questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll make sure to get to them. But here's another email. Now, on this email, I think we're trending into less and less words. I think they heard you, Will, because this is not as long, and this might be more
personalized.
Yeah,
it's actually personalized. I love that.
So talk to us about this one.
Okay, so there's one super key thing that I want to point out here. I don't know of any company that is raising capital and is then afterwards starting to think about how they're going to spend that money. Like, unless it's just like, 2021 vibes where we're out here just like raising cash on cash and like, good luck with it. Like, most like respectable venture capitalists are going to ask you for a plan with that cash. And so that is where like this like misses the mark some. But I just have to call out or are my detective skills way off? Question mark, smiley face is fire. I absolutely love this. And there's a core reason why I love this. You are asking them to correct you. People love to do that. They eat that stuff up. If I'm sending like my version, well, I'll say but Christina Finseth taught me it, version of a breakup email. It's really just bye for now. I'm just like, hey, let me know if I've got this all wrong, right? And people can't help but give you a clear view of what's going on. Now, it does require, of course, that personalization element where you're just like asking them to correct your research, like, hey, am I off here, right? But I just wanted to call it. I love that. With that, how would I adjust this? So I love the start. I would just jump into, I'm guessing you're starting to thinking like, or you could either say most pre-seed companies we work with are immediately starting to like spin up hiring. That's exactly what we help with. Are my detective skills way off, or do you already have a solution in place for hiring? Like you can make it shorter for sure. Because like hiring's a fairly simple challenge. It's like you either need it or you don't, and like you either have a solution or you don't. Right. So like in my mind, like that's sort of how I'd approach that.
So my take is like the ending. Do you feel like it's too like, you don't know me, I don't know you, like we could dive in further? It doesn't. Then there's PS, and then there's more pressure. Do you feel like that's too much like pull?
Morgan, I basically stopped reading after the question. Let's be real. And that's what most buyers are going to do. Right. Like all that extra noise below is just like, yeah, I know you do hiring and like that's helpful. Okay. That's priority, yes or no. And so like when I think about crafting that message, I either need them to tell me that's a priority, or I need to convince them very quickly that this is something we can totally help them with, right?
Yeah.
And so you're a big fan of this, like name dropping clients that are hyper relevant for them. And so like, you know, in the startup world, you'd be like, we've worked with a number of YC companies as they've gone from pre-seed to A. Right. And like sort of showcase like you can be with them along that journey. That can help add a lot of credibility in this conversation. But like overall, I mean, I just use YC as an example, right? But like you could even mention like, I've seen this backfire though, where like some people would be like, yeah, we've worked with like Norwest as our venture partner. And they'll be like, we've worked with Norwest companies before. And then my immediate get response is, why didn't Norwest reach out about you? Right.
Yeah.
It introduces weird doubt. And so like if they're within the same portfolio, it's actually worth just like, hey, we worked with X company. Or like if they're, you know, within the same portfolio, try to get that warm intro. But if it's like a similar portfolio, I think it's like better to just like state like other venture firms like blank and blank. We've worked with their portfolio companies.
That's actually a very interesting take. I never thought of it that way. Is that like if they do mention and they legitimately do work with those companies in the portfolio, but then the person that, I mean, obviously the VC firm does not reach out on their behalf, that could lead to that hesitation. That's a really good point. Never thought that way. So maybe some other people, you can take that as well. That was like my take. I think the first 3 sentences are like, whoa, like I'm in, right? Like I don't, and I think the key piece to what we're talking about is how can you tie the pre-seed stage company to like why this is important for hiring for these pre-stage companies with another company that's relevant, like we just talked about. I think that's the piece. I think that's the biggest piece, I think, at the end of the day. But that's just the biggest part. Mark's query in the Q&A would merit some input. Which one are we looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Let's share it. Yeah. So if you give a prospect no idea what solution you provide, what is the percentage of people who will seek you out versus I have no idea what you do, so why waste my time? So my point with like avoiding talking about yourself is your signature line is inevitably going to do that for you. And so like, don't sleep on it. But like, if you in like one sentence can clearly state what you provide, right? It's an in-inbox writing assistant that helps you write better emails, right? Or yeah, what I'll say in like casual conversation, it's like Grammarly and Gong had a love child, right? And it's like people can quickly be like, all right, I kind of get what that is, right? But they don't have like a perfect view of what that is. It's just like, it's just enough to like satisfy that, all right, what is that? That's really what I was getting at. Hopefully that helps with that answer.
Hopefully that helps Mark and Caitlin for you as well. Hopefully that helps that perspective to get back on that. So let's see. Let's go through. Well, first and foremost, let's pause. Make sure that everybody's good. We have about 15 minutes left here. So if you have questions, definitely put them in here because we're going to make sure to get back to them. Let us know in the chat. Is this helpful and insightful so far? Let us know. We want to make sure that we're on the right page, right? We want to make sure that we're good here on top of that. So let us know if this has been helpful and insightful so far in the chat. This just let us know we're going in the right direction. What we're going to do here is I'm going to pull up another question here because it relates to the whole threading, following up. Like we've been talking about this theme for a while. I think this is actually really important for us to talk about. So what I'm going to do is bring up this question from Peter, and it's talking about, okay, what does a good bump email look like? So I have my perspective on this, but obviously we'd love to hear your perspective as well, Will.
Yeah. So I've obviously read some of your perspective. And so like certain word choices and whatnot that I'm a huge fan of, by the way. I think one of the biggest things that people get wrong with the bump, the reason the bump works, and by the way, for everyone who's listening is like, what the heck is a bump? A bump is, okay, I send you this hyper thoughtful email and then I'm like, crap, they didn't respond. Well, you bump that email to the top of their inbox, right? So you're just like basically refreshing the thread and bringing it up to the top. And so the classic term for that is you bump. So you're bumping it back up. So you're just responding to the original note. Now it became really, really popular to do like just thoughts ? Because it felt internal. It like hit on this like urgency factor of like, oh, I missed something that's important. Let me go look at it, right? The problem is like buyers got really used to it really quickly. And instead of having that like, ooh, that's urgent factor, it became that, ooh, I know what you're trying to do, and that's really annoying. I put it in the same category. It's like, Morgan, would you be opposed to potentially not meeting me? Right? And like,
hey, that was fire for a while until everybody
started man, like post loss, man. It was just like, you're trying to trick me into the answer. And like, I'm like, I now get those emails and I'm like, I can't bother with this. Like
you know what's happening.
Yeah. So with a bump email, like I really want to make sure I remind them of the context for why I'm bumping it.
Yep.
Right. If I'm going to bump something, I want to say, hey, given the following thing, like that's like why I really wanted this to be a conversation. So that original research that you spent so much time on, just reuse it in the bump to make that thoughts email a little bit more thoughtful.
There we go. So that's the first time I heard that. Make the thoughts even more thoughtful. All right. So my perspective on this, well, you've heard this many times. Some of you may have heard this if you listen to my content. Bubbling back up to the top, anything related to that. Did you see my email? I always tell people to stay away from. This also you can use when you're following up with people on LinkedIn messages, videos, whatever you want to do. I just simply ask for people for their feedback. So if I think about it from like a psychological like standpoint, people like to give feedback. They love it. And so when I'm following up with a very personalized email, so typically that's my framework. I'll send somebody something very personalized, something that actually will like land and they'll be actually interested in. So I simply will just be like a one-liner. It'll be like, hi, Will, any feedback on my email? That's it. Now, with feedback, you're going to get 3 phases of feedback, which is like positive sentiment, which is like, I really like this email. I didn't get a chance to get back to you, which people are busy. That sometimes happens. Neutral feedback, which is like, thanks for this email. I looked at it briefly, but I need to look at it again. I'll get back to you. All right, you got something. And then The other feedback is like either they like the email but they're not interested, or they'll be like unsubscribe, which we like probably the worst answer. And I'll say, oh, unsubscribe. It's like, oh, okay, great, thanks for killing my entire existence. I really appreciate that. So when you think about that, that's actually a really good follow up. Now, some of you are going to immediately say, what's the data? Now, I'm going to tell you what the data that I've seen personally. I'll tell you what other clients have seen, but then you have to try it for yourself to figure out if you're going to get the same. So for me, it's like a 10 to 20% reply rate, like when I do that as a follow up to like the main thread. So, but also that correlates that the first email was actually legitimately good, right? So, like, there's a lot of factors that play into this. Now, for clients, let's say on average, it'd be around like 5 to 10%, which we know is also really good. And then some people have even higher than that. So, the feedback is something I like to use a lot. That's like typically my lane that I like to go. People, again, love to give feedback. They love to give those assessments, and that's a way that you can try. So if some of you are struggling, you're like, oh, like I don't really know what to do here on your bump email, that's what I'd recommend.
And Morgan, you actually hit on something really interesting in the types of replies that you get. So I think people get really caught up in like, did they reply or did they not? And they don't realize the optionality they have in front of them. So if I send you an email, you really have 4 things you can do with it. You can do something with it, which is either respond or click through, take some kind of action. You can delay, right? Which happens all the time. I get emails. I'm like, ooh, I need to think about that. And then I'm like, I'll come back to it later. Delete, or in this case, unsubscribe. Or I can delegate it to somebody else. And so one of the things that I find to be a really good bump as well, it's sort of a different angle of a bump, is I'm just like, hey, realize this might not be up your alley given XYZ's job description and like, typical groups that we work with. Would Morgan be a better person to talk to? Or you can start with, would Morgan be a better person to talk to given, whatever reason? That can be really effective at driving either like a forward, which you'll see in your open tracking where it goes from like 0 to like 3.
Right.
Or like you get that response and then like worst case scenario, they don't respond. And now I know I'll go reach out to Morgan next.
Simple enough. So Will, I know you have something. I'm looking actually right now at an email that I just sent and got a reply with. So I'm going to show you the email in real time because everyone's like, well, how does this actually work? I understand. So Will, do you have something you can pull out of nowhere right now? Or like, I'm about to go find mine so then I can just show people like, here's an example, like in real time.
Example
Like
bump.
well, I mean, not example bump because that's like super straightforward. People want like an actual email that we've sent that I've got a reply. Like I'm looking at mine because I have a whole document right now. I'm trying to pull one out for y'all real quick so I can just show you like, okay, here's an example of something that I have done like in the past like month. So if you got one that we could pull from the rafters, we'll do that for you, Brian. We got you. Don't worry. We're not just saying things to say things. We actually have some emails, but we want to pull one that's actually relevant so we're good and we don't, dox it. We can dox it real quick. But this question is actually interesting. Something for us to think about. I have no idea what the answer to this is. You might. How is the new Apple security impacting overall deliverability of emails? That is way above my pay grade, but I don't know the answer to this question. I'm gonna be real. I'll figure it out. I'll go do some research, but I definitely don't know the answer to this question. But you might.
So maybe I'm out of date on this, but I know the more recent like privacy updates have been really focused around driving like privacy around open tracking. So if you heard me sort of mention like 0 to 3 on that open tracking, like that's because like a lot of times you'll get like false positives. And Apple in this case is a company that is driving a lot of that false positive. So if you use Apple Mail and somebody emails you something, they open the email on a like separate server far, far away from you, and then they send it to you eventually, right? And so that tracking pixel that you have that's tracking your open rate all of a sudden becomes kind of worthless. And so open tracking in and of itself is kind of falling out of favor for what it's able to actually do. Now, if I'm speaking to deliverability in general, there's some like just obvious best practices, right? So there's the don't include tracking links, and like people get like really hot and bothered about this because they're like, what do you mean? How do I know if they click the link? How do I know like what's happening here? Problem with the tracking link is think about a phishing attack. A phishing attack within a company. I'm sending you something and I'm trying to get you to go to some false page, right? And when I'm doing that, what it looks like is the exact same thing as when I'm sending you a tracking link, which is it goes somewhere that like the computer can't really figure out where it's going. And then it knows that it's going somewhere else. And so like if I'm a spam filter and I'm looking at that, I can't tell the difference between, A and B. And so I'm just going to be like, it's probably trash. So that's a big one. Hyperlinking. The other pieces here that you sort of have to think about with deliverability is how often, Maury mentioned that like unsubscribe response. There's also the silent unsubscribers, the people who mark you as spam when you send them automated steps. And those people are crushing your chance of delivering into the inbox. And so regardless of what Apple Mail is up to, like that's going to just like demolish you. And so that's why I'm such a strong advocate for sending that thoughtful note, making sure there's a reason behind every outreach so that, if somebody doesn't see this and just go, oh, this is trash, and then unsubscribe, put you in the spam folder and put your entire domain at risk.
And on that note, y'all, we're out. No, I'm kidding. So I have an email that I'm going to share here, and I'll show you. It's a framework. You all can copy this. It's been actually pretty successful so far. I've mixed a couple people's advice, my own take on how I do emails, so you can see, like, I don't really like write long emails, but this is also important. I'm going to share this event that we have coming up through Cognism here. We have an in-person event that's going to be in London. All right, so if you're not in London or near London, this is probably not an event for you. All right. Unless you're flying in. I don't know if you want to fly in, but I'll give you context. So what we're doing is we're doing it in person in London. It's the Dragon's Den. Here in the States, it's Shark Tank style, basically event where we're going to be grading and evaluating cadences live that teams are going to bring in at this event. So this exclusive event, something that we're doing. I'll be there. We'll have Alex Elaine there if you follow his content. We'll have Alice, CMO of Cognism there. David, if you follow these cold calling workshops, he's going to be there. Pack house, as you can see. So if you're in the London area, right, or if you want to fly to London, it's cool as well. I'm not telling you. You can do whatever you want. But if you want to come to the event, scan this code. I will be there. The team will be there. This will be a ton of fun. We're going to be breaking down all different types of cadences. We're going to be giving out tactics on how you can be successful right now. And we're just going to have some fun. So if you are listening in and you are in London, sign up. Add you here. If you're not in London, maybe we'll do it somewhere else at some point. But we're going to be in London. So definitely check that out if you're going to be around. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the example for the class, all right? Because y'all are like, okay. Are you ready for this email? Yeah, are they even ready, Will? Are they ready for this email?
You got an example too, so I'm ready.
All right, we're ready. So I'm going to give y'all real quick this example. And again, you're going to see the way that I do this, y'all. Like, I really keep these things very straightforward, all right? Boom. So example for the class. I'm actually zoom in because I know sometimes. All right, cool. This is super zoomed in. All right, so to give context, as part of one of the services that I do, I do like leadership executive interviews with people to extract their voice into content so that they can do content at scale, but it remains in their voice, right? Super straightforward. So what I do is I always try to figure out, like, okay, like, are they actually doing anything at all when it comes to posting? So you'll notice my style is a little bit different, right? I don't say hi. I don't say hey. I just go straight into it, right? So I just say, hey, I love this post. Here's the person's name. I said, hey, you might be having a headache creating this content consistently. And then I say, here's my service, worth the conversation. And then I add my PS at the end because the post was around AE's prospecting. So that's why I added that. So that's this email. All right. Y'all wanted an email. Here's my email. Will can also tell me this sucks too, but it did get a reply. It actually led to a meeting. And this actually is one of the larger organizations in the world. I'm not going to tell you, but this actually led into a response. But y'all could always break it down and like, yo, Morgan, this was trash. I'm also cool with that as well. But this is a legitimate email that I did send. So Brian, I know you're looking for one. I saw a couple people thumbs up. Brian, this is my email. This is what I said.
Yeah, I was gonna make a joke about even if I didn't like it, Morgan, but I do. I was like, you got the reply, which is the objective truth behind this, right? That context on the AEs is perfect. I think this is great, man. So I'm looking at the logic here. First off, like this message, we're nitpicking because I'm like, we're talking about a message that is 99.999% better than what goes out the door. But I'm thinking about like the logic flow of like loving the posts, talking to other execs. I'm seeing a lot of them struggle to remain consistent. Would love to make sure the quality of posts you're putting out like doesn't like disappear.
Right.
At service. Yeah. Would you say you're struggling to keep up with the pace of like posting every day? Like that might be like some adjustments or like a variation to try, but I'm like, this is solid.
Yeah, I think you so. And we're having a real time. Will has not seen this email, by the way, so this is not safe. So y'all know, like he has not seen this. So I guess if we're looking at this here, you're saying that there's like a disconnect between remaining consistent and then the next sentence, like it doesn't really connect as much. Is that what you're saying there?
I'm trying to think about it from the perspective of like, if you're reaching out to me and you're like,
yeah,
loving the LinkedIn post, Will, it's almost like you need to make it more obvious that like is Sarah in this case posting consistently?
Right.
And it's like that would be like the second layer observation of like, notice like you're only posting every other day. Would you say it's hard to stay consistent? I hear this from a ton of execs. I have a new service that's helping them create content without headaches to amplify their brand narrative. Let me know if that's worth a chat.
That makes, because I'm kind of just saying you're creating quality posts. This is what I'm hearing from other people, but I didn't contextualize for Sarah that she's only doing it every other day, which makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because like I might think I'm consistent because I do it a few times a week, but in reality, like top voices are doing it every day, and like they're missing out on like that amplification factor.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great call out. So hopefully y'all took this email. You can take a framework, you can adjust it, but that's like how I do it. I don't do any highs. I just kind of go straight into it. I found this actually be really helpful as of late. Add in their name towards the end. I just want to get right into it. But we're 1 minute over. The question is, for those of you who are still hanging here, do you want to see Will's email? Let us know, because we're right at the hour. We could probably push it an extra if y'all want to see Will's email, but y'all, if y'all want to see Will's email, let us know. We'll keep going because I don't want someone to be like, oh, I had to go into a meeting. I got to get out of here. But looks like people, are you good? Will, are you good? I don't know. Also, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
I
don't want to be like, hey, you got to hang on and you have a meeting that you're late to.
I got a team huddle. Right. I'll be a couple minutes.
All right, cool. So Will's gonna share his, and then we're gonna see this email as well.
All right. All right. Can y'all see this? Okay. So this would be the final touch that I would send to a decision maker. So I'm taking bottom of the line insights or below the line insights, and I'm bringing them top of fold, right? So I'm talking to an SDR manager, Sarah, and I'm bringing that to like a VP of sales, Joan in this use case. And so I'm like taking this and then attaching the original observation in, and then bringing a relevant use case in, explaining exactly what we do. Is that worth a conversation? So you'll see here, there's like layers to the personalization. Like, here's what I'm hearing from your managers. Here's what I imagine you're focused on based off of what's external. We can totally help with this, worth diving deeper. Now, the message that I would send to get that insight would be something along these lines, where this might be a follow-up to an original note that I'd send, but like this sort of gives you like the full sense of like, hey, I was going to reach out to Joan, but I want to make sure I knew my stuff first. Given your own X, I wanted to see how you're doing this. That's a thoughtful approach to someone below the line that says like, hey, like, I know you're not the buyer. I'm not an idiot, but like, I want to know this so that I don't look like an idiot when I reach out, because I'm actually just trying to be helpful.
I love it. And also as well, our final point here is this email that is here as well. Don't neglect to, you can even do this on LinkedIn. I found this actually be really helpful to reach out to people below the power line and say something similar. Even doing voice messages is the same. So don't just say, oh, it's only email. Like, you can use other different variations here as well to be successful. So hopefully everyone that's tuning in, I know we're rolling out. If you're in the London area or around London, check out the pin event. If you want to go sign up, definitely check that out if you are around. Also as well, for everyone that was here, hopefully you enjoyed this content. You got something out of it in round 2. I know we talked about things from a different perspective. Saw some real emails in real time as well. And Will, where can people find you if they have more questions? Is it in your inbox? Is that where you just live now, or just?
I do spend quite a lot of time in there.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is where I'm posting content. Yeah, I saw some comments about SalesLoft subject line grader. Awesome tool. We built our own subject line grader into Lavender as well. So if you're ever sort of looking to evaluate that email copy and give it a feel, Lavender is literally free to download. So don't be shy. It's just lavender.ai.
Perfect.
That unintentionally rhymed.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't know. There's some bars on us. I don't know if you're right. I don't know you were about it. All right, y'all. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this. Like I said, we'll see y'all next time, and y'all have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan.
Cheers.